Welcome to Upticks with Jake Falcon, founder and CEO of Falcon Wealth Advisors. In this podcast, we help high net worth individuals overcome financial complexities. We do this by enhancing financial literacy and discussing topics in a language free from industry jargon. Join us as we help explain exactly what having a solid financial plan means, as Jake draws from years of experience in helping hundreds of individuals get financially organized and focused on their goals. We hope you find Upticks educational, entertaining, and shareable. Now, on to the show.
Welcome back to the show. This is episode 262. Cory, another palindrome episode, one of my favorites.
That's right. It sure is. Here we are again.
262. Wow, that's a lot. We need to go back and look at episode 1. We need to do that.
I think I remember it.
Do you? Okay, good. Well, thank you again for joining me, and thank you to all our viewers and listeners for tuning in to another episode of Upticks. I'm very, very, very excited to announce, Cory, that we've got a new format to today's show, and we're going to be talking about current financial planning and investment topics. We feel like we have really pounded the table with Roth IRAs, Social Security, 401ks, all things that are very important to our clients. And so we think that our content library is robust enough with that. So now we want to talk about more current topics. Our clients want our opinions and they want our 2 cents on things, Cory. So in Upticks now, we're going to share it.
All right, they're going to get it.
Okay, good. So let's just dive right in here. And thank you again for everyone tuning in. If you think our content is any good, please a thumbs up, 5-star rating, like and share it. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer live on Upticks, feel free to email our content manager, Luke at falconwealthadvisors.com. And he's happy to share it with us, and we'll talk about your question here. We won't embarrass anybody. We won't divulge your personal information. But if you are having that question, I'm sure somebody else is as well. So again, thank you. But Cory, let's dive into it today. Maybe we'll take a time out here halfway through and hear what's going on in your personal life. But I wanted to jump right into our content for today.
Let's do it.
All right. So I'll kick us off here first with an article I read in the Wall Street Journal. And it talks about investors are finally making money on bonds and CDs. Be prepared to pay taxes. Cory, I think this is a big misunderstanding that a lot of people have, that they're used to their savings accounts not making any money. And so they really haven't had to pay taxes on interest because they weren't making any interest. But it brings up several different types of investments. And I wanted to just go through that here. And then I wanted to hear your take on it. So CDs, which Cory actually haven't really been popular most of your career, have they?
No, they haven't.
So CDs are certificates of deposit typically issued by banks. If you have these in a brokerage or taxable savings account, they are typically taxed the year you earn interest. So basically, if you bought a 5-year CD, you owe taxes on the interest earned paid out each and every year. And they're typically federally, like I said, and state taxed. There's also money market funds, Cory. They can be subject to federal and state income tax also. But you got to be careful because there's taxable money market funds and then there's tax-free money market funds. Typically, the tax-free money market funds pay less, but you might not be subject to taxes. So you got to do what's called a tax equivalent yield to see which one of those makes sense. Also, another one that we invest in, Cory, are treasury bills. And they're generally exempt from state and local taxes, actually. You do owe federal taxes on the interest payments each year when you file your taxes. You can also buy treasuries yourself through a Treasury Direct website out there. So we're big fans, generally speaking. Again, this is not investment advice, but I'm very familiar with treasury bills. And then the last one, Cory, that I wanted to bring up are municipal bonds. Typically, if they're issued in the state that you live in, you don't have to pay taxes at the local, state, or federal level. But again, their yields are typically quite a bit lower. So you have to do what's called a tax equivalent yield calculation to determine, you got to look at your tax bracket and then determine if a municipal bond makes sense. So again, you definitely never want to buy a municipal bond in an IRA or Roth IRA because those accounts aren't taxed every year anyways. But anyways, I thought that was an interesting article, Cory, to kick off today's conversation. Again, a lot of people aren't used to making interest on their savings accounts, and they got to understand that they're going to have to owe taxes on that come tax time. You have any thoughts on that before we go to topic number 2?
No, I agree in terms of it's important for people to understand that the interest that you're earning now with rates being higher is going to ultimately be taxable in a lot of different ways and a lot of different mediums. It really depends upon the type of investment specifically, Jake, like you said, but there's also a lot of other considerations around each one of these. But I think the bigger point is the more money that someone has in cash and the more interest that they're earning on that, the more they should expect to ultimately owe by the way of taxes. And don't forget that your friends at Falcon Wealth Advisors can help you with your tax planning and preparing ultimately for that.
Good. What do you got?
Okay. All right. Very good. So to switch it up beyond that, Jake, the first article that I had here was also one from the Wall Street Journal, and it was titled "Paying Extra for Medicare, See If You Are Due a Refund." And the reason I wanted to bring this up and talk about it today is because we talk with clients about this all the time, but the specific article was around the IRMAA surcharges. So IRMAA surcharges ultimately stand for, I can never get this quite right, so I'm going to read it here, Jake. It is income, the IRMAA threshold. This happens to me every time, Jake, the acronym of IRMAA there. But ultimately, it is the income-related monthly adjusted amount. So the idea is the higher taxable income someone has, the more expensive their Part B and Part D premiums for Medicare become, one of which is for prescription drugs, and the other of which is for the doctor's appointments. And the point being, though, and why we bring this up, we talk about tax planning. This article talks about how much more expensive Medicare can get for people as their income moves higher, particularly when people are, in a position where maybe they have to take required distributions from an IRA, and they can't necessarily control what their taxable income looks like. So I think first, this is shining a light on that. But secondly, this article did a useful job of explaining how there are ways to ultimately appeal these IRMAA surcharges. Specifically, if somebody is making the transition from employment to retirement or work stoppage, which is one of the specific items that they talk about in this article, it can actually be appealed. So if you're expecting your Medicare IRMAA surcharges to make the pricing more expensive for you, but you've recently retired, and that's why your prior year's income is going to look higher, there's a process you can go through to appeal that.
Yeah, good luck appealing it. But yeah, that's good.
It can be done.
You have to be careful, right? Because it's mentioned in here that there's a cliff, right? So literally $1 extra in can bring a huge premium increase. And so
yes,
that's good. So that's definitely something that our financial planners look at when we're looking at distributions and taxes every year. But that's good to know that you can certainly appeal it. I like it.
Yep.
Good one. All right, good.
What did you get?
So another article, again, I'm a big fan of the Wall Street Journal, and I get credit to you for this, Cory. For some reason, I stopped reading the Journal. Then a client kind of called me out on an exclusive article that they ran that I missed, but I think the Journal was like the only people to cover it. So I started reading again, and I really am enjoying it. So they had another article in there where, they highlighted how mortgage rates have hit, and again, this is since the article, we're at 7.23% for a 30-year fix. And that's the highest, Cory, since 2001. Where were you in 2001, Cory? What grade were you in?
7th grade.
Yeah. So you definitely weren't home shopping. I was in college still, and I wasn't thinking about buying a house in college, but that's crazy. Now, the article went on to say that some borrowers are paying even loftier rates, and literally like a couple of weeks ago it was only 7.09%. So that's crazy how much it can jump up. But also applications for purchase mortgages have dropped to their lowest level since 1995. And existing home sales fell for the 4th time in 5 months in July. And there's a quote in there by a chief economist at Freddie Mac, Sam Cater, who said the conveyor belt of houses that come on and off the market is just grinding to a halt. So I'm curious, Cory, do you think this means there's going to be a housing bubble that's bursting?
No, I don't think that it has to do with a housing bubble bursting. I think it's the fact that we've seen home prices and interest rates move up simultaneously for the last couple of years. That, it's created this, his quote is perfect about the conveyor belt, because people that want to buy houses are finding that homes are so, unaffordable and the interest rates are really high. But on the flip side, there's a bunch of people that have really low mortgage rates on their homes, whether they refinanced or bought in the last few years, and they're not moving. So there's just not a lot of transactions, but it seems like when home prices come down, interest rates move higher and vice versa. But overall, the trend has been higher for both. And obviously, I wouldn't expect that to continue forever.
Right. I agree. I think bubbles are normally formed by irrational exuberance. That's not, I mean, well, I guess pricing has been a little irrational, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be a cause for a burst. I think, like you said, the conveyor belt grinding to a halt means that it's all going to freeze a little bit. And I think people are going to stop moving. And I think people are going to keep renting that don't own a house. And I think that's it's going to pose a headwind, certainly for the housing market, but I don't necessarily see a crash coming. I'm hopeful that prices will come down, and then interest rates will ease a little bit. I would like to see some, that some might call that a soft landing, where it's like, okay, prices have gotten a little over their skis. Maybe they start to slow down their rate of increase or even come down, and then maybe rates soften a little bit. But the good news is, for people that have been waiting to buy, like I said, hopefully those prices come down. And, people say this, but I want to be careful too, that even if you get a 7% mortgage, theoretically, you could always refinance, but nobody really knows when those rates are going to go back down. So I don't want people getting talked into getting a house or a mortgage right now with the assumption that rates are going to be lower in a year, because they may not be lower in a year. It may take 10 years. It may take 5 years. Nobody knows that. So again, I think a home is not an investment. I think a home should be a place to make memories and to have a family and to feel safe. So again, I wouldn't look at it as an investment. If you need a new home or want to move, you should move as long as you can afford it.
Yeah, real quick though, Jake, one more point I want to make that I found really interesting in that article was the point about the buyer's market for mortgages and mortgage-backed securities specifically. They talked in that article, part of the reason that interest rates have moved much higher than even the yield on the 10-year Treasury is because the market for investors to buy mortgages via mortgage-backed securities has really dried up since ultimately the Federal Reserve stopped buying mortgage-backed securities when they began raising interest rates.
That is interesting. Yeah. Good. What do you got next for us?
All right, very next. So take us a different direction here. This is an article, a local article from the Kansas City Star. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that name. But the headline of this was, "A leading opponent of environmental investing is helping Kansas's public pension system." So ESG investing, or economic social governance investing, is something that has become more pertinent, more relevant, at least more discussed over the last decade or so. But what I found interesting about this article is that someone who is a leading national opponent of ESG investing was ultimately just named to the board of the Kansas Public Retirement System, KPERS. Someone who is a pronounced opponent of ESG investing was just named to the KPERS board because there have been more and more officials ultimately who have come out and said ESG investing should not be the end goal, and that investment decisions should be guided by fiduciary responsibility and not anything else.
Interesting.
What are your thoughts on that, Jake?
Yeah, I guess it depends. Like, probably on the pension system, you're right. I think fiduciary needs to trump ESG. I think ultimately you have an obligation to the fund to do the right thing, and so ESG, I think that it's going to continue to play a role, but I would argue that it's been a little bit of a fad in the industry because ultimately investors want to make money. Now it's great. Like we always talk about having your money aligned with your values and your principles. But yeah, that's pretty crazy that they did that. It's a bold move, but I think ultimately that pension fund needs to be solvent and funded and
investment returns. Yep.
And if you want to align your investments with your own values, you should do that with your own money, not with other people's money.
That's good.
Personally, that's just my personal take. Okay, good. Let's move along here. I got another one here from Barron's. Huge fan of Barron's, been a subscriber for a long time. They had an article, Cory, about the retirement tipping point. Here's when investors decide to rely on financial advisors. So I found this article interesting. It says that 27% of investors more than 5 years from retirement look for an advisor, which I thought was pretty interesting. But what's even crazy is when they get within 5 years of retirement, the percentage of advisor-reliant investors jumps to 46%. So it almost doubles once they get within 5 years of retirement. So I guess that just shows that as that topic gets more serious and you realize that you've got to switch over from saving mode to spending mode, and your portfolio needs to generate income and have asset protection and growth in income, that it's pays to have an advisor. It's interesting, Cory, most of our clients come to us, within 5 years of retirement. But do you have any take on that? Would you argue against that? Do you think investors need an advisor like us before that? Some of them do.
It
I
depends.
guess.
I hate to say that, Jake. I hate to say it depends, but I really feel like it does. I think that most people are probably consider themselves to be do-it-yourself investors until they're not. Either until they've met an advisor who can help them, or until they realize that there's more on their plate than they want to manage or deal with. So it does make sense to me that as people get closer to retirement, obviously people become more reliant upon advisors that they work with. But Jake, you and I talk about this with clients and on the show. What's interesting is once people make that transition into retirement, does not mean that financial planning and retirement planning just magically gets simpler or easier. In fact, for a lot of people, I would say it almost gets more complicated.
I agree. Yeah, and I think again, there's certain circumstances. If somebody has a financial issue or needs education, or makes a lot of money and doesn't know how to deal with it. So an advisor can almost always play a role given the circumstance. But that's good that people are seeking out advice when they're getting close to retirement, because you can make some huge mistakes. Like you mentioned, Cory, it's not a set it and forget it system. You make some big time mistakes leading up to retirement that'll cost you and your family literally thousands of dollars, if not more. All right, Cory, we're going back to the Wall Street Journal. Credit card debt is rising. What's behind your higher bills? I thought this was a really good article about holding yourself accountable. It says that if your credit card bill is growing every month, don't blame rising interest rates. It says to look in the mirror, which is crazy. Did you know this? So the average rate is at 22%, up from 16.65% a year ago. That's a huge jump in the average interest. So again, if you're running credit card debt, you have to recognize that interest rates have gone up and you're going to be paying more. But again, you got to look at yourself in the mirror, because I thought this article did a really good point. I didn't know this, Cory, but there's some law that was passed that basically said that I've got it right here. Higher rates make existing card debt more expensive to manage. Federal regulations require, though, that card issuers set minimum monthly payments that cover all of the finance charges. So that means that higher rates can't grow your balances on their own. So that's the whole point of the article, is that if you're seeing your balance going up more, it's because you're charging more. It's not because of the interest. Yes, interest rates are higher, but your minimum payment covers all of that. So if you have $10,000 on your credit card and it turns into $11,000, that's not the interest. It's because you spent more. And it says that the main reason balances are going up in America is that we're spending more on non-essentials such as travel and clothing. And even as we curb spending on other categories, still we're spending a lot of money on. And again, I get it. There's a lot of pent up demand from COVID. And people are probably going back to work, so they have to buy new work clothes. So again, you just got to be aware of those credit card balances. That's crazy though, isn't it? 22%, that's a lot.
Yes. Yeah, that is a lot. It's really high. And I think that it is, it just seems like one of the most basic fundamentals when it comes to personal finance for people is to try to get those credit cards paid off every month and avoid paying that interest.
Yeah, I get it though, but it's not always easy. So,
it's not.
Ultimately, if you're watching or listening to this show and you've got credit card debt and you want some help creating a plan, we can help you with that. So I know it's not easy. It's easy for us to say, just pay your balance off every month. But Cory, if you don't got the money, you don't got the money.
Sure.
But if you want some guidance and help, our financial planners can certainly here to help you with that. All right, good. Cory, got a couple more topics here. Fire away.
All right. The next one that I included here was from Barron's, and this was 10 key lessons about life and money that I learned the hard way. And this was written by Jonathan Clements, who recently had a book come out. And I followed his blog for a while called The Humble Dollar. And he used to be a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. And this article was a bit longer, but I thought some of the lessons that were in here that he really kind of highlighted specifically were really good. And I thought, Jake, that one of them that really kind of struck out to me that I just wanted to bring up to you, and I want to just find the quote real quick here. But basically, more or less what the author said is that he found that not worrying about or thinking about money in and of itself was a luxury. that he wouldn't be able to afford if he spent that money on non-essential things. I thought that was really important. I thought that was really interesting, that basically his perspective was that, like, one of the life lessons that he's had is, if he doesn't have to worry about what money looks like, that is a luxury in and of itself that can be better for an individual than it could be to spend that money. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, and that's an older article, isn't it? I feel like that came out a while ago.
I don't think so.
Oh, it's not? Yeah.
August 26th.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he has a new book. He has a new book that just came out.
Nice.
Or it's coming out.
Oh, good. And I'll wrap it up here, Cory, because I know we've got to run here soon.
Yep.
But I actually wanted to share a headline that a client emailed me, Cory, because they were concerned about an email they received, and it's from Newsbreak, which I've never heard of. Newsbreak, have you?
Not very familiar with it now.
Yeah, newsbreak.com, which is a red flag in and of itself. And some of the bullet points here in this email are: stocks are set to slump and many Americans are prisoners in their own homes, says this guy, David Rosenberg. He also said sky high asset prices are likely to drop if the Fed marches on with interest rate hikes. He says rising rates have driven up mortgage costs, deterring many sellers. Supposedly this guy is an economist. And what bothers me about this is it scared my client. And I coached the client via email, because they're emailing me at night, that, hey, first off, let's agree that no one can predict the future. When you see articles like this that use strong words or hyperbole, you have to recognize that that's a red flag. Somebody says that somebody's a prisoner in their own home, they're doing that to scare you, right? Or stocks are set to slump. Slump is not an economic term. Sky high, that's a red flag, right? Marches on with interest rate hikes, driven up mortgage costs, deterring, like all this language is, Cory, is persuasive language designed to create an emotional reaction so that you probably read more on their website so they can sell you more ads. That's probably exactly what's happening here. So I just cautioned my client to understand that you can't believe what you read. No one predicts the future. If you're not looking to move, what does higher mortgage rates have nothing to do with someone that's not looking to sell their home or buy a new home. So again, I want to just encourage our audience that I hope they understand that Upticks isn't here to scare you or, promote greed. We're here to talk about real financial planning and investment topics. And we're here now to talk about the news and pull the facts out of it and give our opinions. But if clients are reading this stuff, you have to understand it's garbage and it should just be used for entertainment purposes only. And it doesn't really have any merit. The only people that you should be talking about your financial plan is your financial advisor or wealth advisor that's acting as a fiduciary. That's who you should be discussing the economy, the market, and your finances with, not some random email that you get comes through from Newsbreak. And what is a Newsbreak? So
I don't know.
You have any thoughts on that, Cory, as we wrap up?
I think you've said it pretty well, Jake. And I think that these, people ultimately coming out making these predictions, it's happened forever. It's going to continue to happen forever. If it's not him, it's going to be someone else. But I do think that the acceptance of the inability to see in the future and to plan accordingly, people do need to accept that there's not any one person that, has the vision or has the, knows exactly what the way that things are going to play out. And if they did, they wouldn't tell me or you or anybody else how it ultimately.
It wouldn't be on Newsbreak. I promise you, they wouldn't be on Newsbreak.
That's right. They wouldn't have anything to sell. They wouldn't need to sell anything.
And what makes me sad somewhat is my client is an educated person, right? And it's like,
sure,
this still gets at smart people because it's plugging at their emotions, which we're all emotional. And so, because we're humans. And so again, I just want to encourage our audience not to take action on that stuff. Call your wealth advisor, forward the email to us. We'll talk about the facts. We'll talk about your plan and we'll take it from there. So good, Cory, as we wrap up today's show, Rachel did comment on the book that you're reading. She read it, the one you're reading about Churchill. So are you enjoying it still? She liked it.
I am. Yes, I have been. I've been devouring it. I'm almost done with it.
She said that author has a better book. So you might have to reach out to my wife.
This is the third one I've read by him.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Maybe I don't know what she's
Either way, I'll
talking
talk to Rachel about it though, because I've loved the other two. I plan on pretty much reading every book he's written.
What are the other two you've read? Do you remember?
Devil in the White City.
Oh yeah, you told me
and In the Garden of Beasts.
Okay, I'll have to see.
It's also about World War II.
Wow, awesome. And what's new with me, after my huge win at the Falcon Tour, Cory, I followed that up with a last place finish of the next week. And it all had to do with my driver. And I think what's crazy about golf is I think I was overthinking it, and I was really trying to steer my drives in the perfect place, and it backfired. And I had a lot of penalty shots, and it wasn't good. But I had a lot of fun. The weather was really nice, and I met some really great guys, and I learned a lot. Sometimes I think you learn more from bad rounds than you do from good rounds. So I learned a lot. Guy I played with shot 65, though. Talk about that. He's legit. So that was fun to watch.
I bet it was. That's a pretty good score.
So good. Well, thank you again, Cory. I know we got to wrap up. Thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully you're enjoying the new format. If you have any direct feedback, I'll take it. My email is jake@falconwealthadvisors.com. Cory's will also take the feedback. It's CORY@falconwealthadvisors.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we hope you have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Upticks. Click the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes become available. Also, be sure to visit our website, falconwealthadvisors.com, and click the Contact Us button if you'd like to meet with Jake and his team.